Sean Finnegan, and you are listening to Restitutio, a podcast that seeks to recover authentic Christianity and live it out today. Have you ever read miracle stories in the Bible and asked yourself, I wonder if this happens today? My guests today are Josh and Daisy Jones of the UK, who share their testimonies of God intervening in and through their lives. Hear about Josh's miraculous healing from asthma, Daisy's baptism when a Muslim spoke in tongues, and various adventures walking with God both at home and abroad, especially in Israel. They also talk about their interesting journey to Unitarianism, as well as their plans to organize the first Unitarian Christian Alliance conference in the London area in the summer of 2024. Here now is episode 517, Walking with God, with Josh and Daisy Jones. So Josh and Daisy Jones, so great to have you on the show today. Thanks for joining me.
Our pleasure.
Yeah, thanks for asking us.
Yeah. To begin with, I thought you could just introduce yourselves and tell about who you are, and then we could get into your story a little bit and your background. So who are you? Who are the Joneses?
An unconventional couple, presently living in North London. I'm a serving officer in the parish regiment, been so for 20 years in one capacity or another. We have got two wonderful children, Joy and Isaac, 5 and 3 respectively. Days, do you want to talk about yourself?
Okay, well, I guess my first role is mummy at the moment, because I've got a 5 and a 3-year-old, and they are an absolute joy. In fact, they're both called Joy, because one is called Joy and the other one's called Isaac, which means joy and laughter. So we're in the stage of still sleepless nights a little bit. I'm still nursing my youngest. So if you hear a cry in the background, I might have to disappear, but such is life. But we didn't want to miss this opportunity to speak with you, because we listened to you a lot, and we wanted to share our story.
Let's hear about how you came to faith. I don't know who would like to go first, but I've heard that in the UK in general and London in particular, there are a lot of secular-minded people. So how is it that you two are Christians? Really, I guess would be my first question. So who would like to go first?
Yeah, so I was actually born in Australia. I grew up there, New Zealand, the Solomon Islands, Portugal, before moving to England at the age of 12. And as a young kid, I was, forced to go to church. My parents did have a faith. It is like live and vibrant today, very much so. But I think in the younger days, it was very much just trying to instill in me some good behavior and some good Bible stories. At the age of 12, I moved to a place called Orpington in Kent. Again, just outside London, but to the southeast this time, as opposed to the northwest where we are presently, and went to a really good Baptist church. I very quickly fell in love with the Word of God. There were some really godly men there who used to run the Bible study. Week by week, would go and just really enjoy studying the Bible. As I got into my kind of later teens, one by one, my friends would leave as the lure of teenage life just became too strong for them. But I just kind of fell more and more in love with the Word. So I remember coming home from school and just like going into the garage that we had converted and just like reading the Bible, and kind of got to the age of like 16, 17, where it was like, if this is real, then if I pray, something should happen. Because, this book is a story of men and women having supernatural encounters with a divine God. Every character is almost like a Marvel superhero, in the sense that something extraordinary is happening in their lives. It's not just a blind faith, it's a living faith. And so I just started kind of praying, whether it was asking questions to understand what this particular passage meant or personal events in my life. Answers just started to arrive through all interesting and peculiar avenues. There was a big move of God. Some Americans are probably aware of it. In 1994, it was kind of aptly named the Toronto Blessing. I did sense a change in the atmosphere in the churches. I saw people kind of leading what I'd more spirit-filled lives, passionate prayer, activity, sharing their faith. And I knew that's what I wanted to do. And in that period of time, I saw miracles personally in my own life. I was healed miraculously of asthma that I'd been suffering from about 7 or 8 to the extent where I got prayed for in church and then completely forgot about it because there was a word that, God wanted to heal someone with asthma. And I thought, I had that since I was 7. Unlike my dad, he was like a fantastic rugby player. I once made the B team at the age of 7. And on my glorious attendance on the pitch, I promptly had an asthma attack within 10 minutes and got rushed to hospital. So my dad's hopes for a rugby player, wearing the Kiwi jersey were cruelly crushed.
Oh, man. And those guys are epic. Those Kiwi rugby guys. Incredible.
Yes. And my dad he was a fantastic rugby player. And so there I was with my little inhalers, and I was 19 at the time, or 18 or 19, 18 I would have been. A few weeks later, I went for my checkup at my local doctor's surgery, and I'd completely forgotten about the prayer. And there was a new doctor, and I went through all the tests, etc. And then I went into her kind of office and sat down, and she just started telling me off. I was like, "What are you doing in here?" Like with a really aggressive voice. "Why are you wasting my time?" And I was just like, "What are you talking about? I'm here for my annual asthma checkup." And she said to me, "There's nothing on these records to indicate you've ever had asthma in terms of the tests that I did, in terms of all of the scans and whatever they did for that checkup." So that was an astonishing thing for me, and never ever looked back. So I went the inhalers and all that stuff.
And how old are you now? You don't look 19 to me.
No, I'm 47 now.
47, okay.
Yeah.
So that's a long track record of not having asthma.
Oh, absolutely, yeah.
Wow, that's incredible.
Yeah, and so, I got baptized. I led my best friend to faith, baptized him in the local swimming pool because his family were Buddhists. And if they knew that he had come to faith, they would have kicked him out of the house. And I was kind of that term on fire. Now, the interesting thing is that I was clearly part of a Trinitarian church. And through my study of scripture, I never believed Jesus was God. And I always knew that my understanding of who God was and who Jesus was different from my Bible teachers, from the pastors and this type of thing. But I never knew there was a name for it. I was completely oblivious to what is Unitarianism and the history of the church, the council creeds and stuff like this. I was just like, for me, scripture's clear. But the outworking of my faith was sharing the gospel. And I felt I could do that without having to confront this issue, because it was just, I was young, I was energetic and this type of thing. So I took a year out in that time. And I felt that the reason why God was going to do this. And my father, in good kind of Kiwi fashion, because at the age of 15, he was given $500 and told to go make his way in the world. I was 18. It's like, right, if you don't get a job within 1 week, you're out of the house. And that was me, on my knees praying. And like literally that day, get a random phone call from a friend of mine who just thought he would call me to offer me a job in the local Silver Spoon Cafe. And I was like, thank you, Lord. So I was living in this kind of vibrant, spirit-filled, love-obedient relationship with God. Went to university. I then set up running something called the Alpha Course. Do you know what the Alpha Course is?
No, I'm not familiar with that.
Do you want to explain what that is, love?
Yeah, it's basically an Anglican introductory course to God, the meaning of life. It's meant to be for beginner Christians and also people inquiring. So it's a very popular course here, run by the kind of, I say, conservative evangelical Anglican wing, but it's hugely popular. Yeah, so the catchphrase is, "Who is Jesus?" essentially, and it's basically questions. That was the original catchphrase. Sorry. Yeah. And it's a 12-week course, and the unique thing about it is introduce this bit, who is the Holy Spirit. So it kind of jumped on the back of kind of the outpouring, or whatever term people would like to use, in 1994, and it gave people to kind of transition from a reading about stuff to kind of stepping forward in terms of an infilling of the Spirit. Now, the intriguing thing is that clearly it's a Trinitarian course, and one of the key catchphrases of it was based on C.S. Lewis's most famous phrases, which was Jesus was either mad, bad, or God. Now, clearly, I never believed that, and but I couldn't tell anyone that, because here I was running this, and I always said, Jesus is either mad, bad, God, or who he said he was.
And because I was running the course, I was able to just slightly amend certain parts.
You got away with that, huh?
I got away with it. I mean, I knew the book. I knew the book back. I literally memorized the entire book. But what I was able to do was present Jesus as he declared he was. Now, I didn't have the same knowledge as I do now in terms of messianic prophecies, but what I just didn't do was just present Jesus as God Almighty. And the amazing thing is, as I recall, genuinely, everyone who completed that course came to an independent, genuine faith. And from this little church grew this really vibrant community. You know, from there, I was involved in setting up a youth group, taking a whole bunch of young kids to church. I mean, things you could never do today. You know, with another kind of friend, we took a 3-year-old, a 5-year-old, a 7-year-old, a 9-year-old, and 12-year-old to church. We only met their parents once. You know, you could never do things like that in this modern era. Yeah, end up joining a pretty vibrant rock band.
And what did you play?
So I played bass. Yeah, so I recall one day, it was my coming to the end, because I studied law at university. Yeah, I'd always, in the careers office, had always been paras, marines, or submarines. But with this explosion of faith, I always kind of joked that I'm in God's army now. So, you know, this is where I'm going to serve. And so I decided to do law. I remember praying in my room that I really wanted to have the opportunity to share my faith with kids in school and stuff like this. The next day, I rode from Hertfordshire, where I was, up to St. Albans. And en route, halfway through, I met this bloke called Mark James, who is now quite a famous worship leader in the Vineyard worship movement. He wasn't then. I had seen his band play about a month or so before. We'd only kind of shook hands. I said hi. But anyway, we got chatting on the zebra crossing, and he goes, "What are you doing on Friday?" It's like, well, nothing. And he goes, "Well, we're going into the local school with the band. We would like you to play bass and to come and share your faith." And I wasn't really a musician by any stretch of imagination. I can hum a tune, I can play a rhythm, and I can move. These guys were proper musicians. You know, I'm the fool who can move around the stage. But that was me. You know, on the Friday, there I am in a school sharing my faith. Not 4 days after, you know, getting my knees in prayer, saying, "Lord, I'd really love to share my faith in schools with young people." And then from there, joined something called Sound Nation and spent the rest of the year basically touring around different schools, doing that exact same thing, whilst somehow managing to do my law degree at the same time. I never let on that my understanding of who God was different to my calling. There are a few things that I used to kind of say, but again, it was before the age of the internet, from what I recall. I hadn't met anyone with any of the knowledge that you or who's the chap that we met, the
Anthony Buzzard.
Yes, Anthony Buzzard. You know, I just wasn't exposed to any of this stuff, and for me, you know, it wasn't important because I was seeing God move. You know, people's lives were being changed.
Can I add an interesting detail, a little factoid?
Okay.
Josh was in 2 bands that were unrelated. The secular one was called Dusk, and the Christian one was called Dust. So yeah, that's a little fact. So yeah, the one with Mark James was Dust, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was Dust. Now I'll kind of just bring this particular part to a close, and then we can go over to Daisy, and then maybe back to me. In this period of time where I felt very close to God. You know, I spent lots of time just out on the streets sharing my faith, and many dark hours, and that an incident occurred in the spirit that shook my faith in a way that I just was not expecting. It created like a kind of a darkness, and it wasn't that my faith in God was shook, but it was my love for God, in the sense that I couldn't understand what had happened. And, you know, I struggled with this thing for almost 5 years. And I went to kind of senior leaders, people who I trusted. But because I was always kind of on the fringe of the churches I was a part of, not so much because of my understanding of who God was, but because I was out there living, sharing, preaching, I never really had that deep mentorship. And when I finally got to speak to the pastor who I really respected, the advice he gave me was terrible. He said, basically, if you can't understand why this happened, you will never trust God. It culminated with me at the age of 25, 26, walking away from everything that I was doing. I remained faithful in season and out of season as best as I could, reconciling what had happened. But it got to a stage where I just was broken inside. And so I decided to step back and walk my own path, which I regret doing. And in that time, I did get married, not pleaded to Daisy, and joined up the army, the parish regiment. There's that amazing verse that, if we are faithless, God is still faithful. And, slowly and surely, he called me back. And I've got many miraculous testimonies of extraordinary protection and provision and guidance, particularly whilst on operations and stuff like this. And my faith has really made a tremendous difference. But the kind of summary statement, so I can break clean and let my beautiful wife speak, is looking back, whilst I was aware of what success looked like potentially in the spirit, using kind of military terminology, what I wasn't aware of was my enemy. And I didn't have the maturity and understanding of just quite what it meant when Jesus said, Satan is the father of lies, and that when he speaks deception, it comes out as truth. We live and fight this battle daily. We see how effective Satan's lies have been in terms of the corruption of some of the most simple statements in the history of mankind. Jehovah our God is one, and how they can turn one into a plurality. It's just, but how Satan can make, but not just truth in terms of words and corrupt stuff, but actually in the spirit as well. And I lacked the maturity of understanding just how deceptive he can be, and the absolute requirement to go back to the scriptures and test everything against the scriptures. Fast forward a number of years till about 7 years ago.
6 years ago. Yeah, you always yeah 6.5 years ago.
Well, that's marriage, isn't it? We met before then.
Yeah.
In the February,
Yes.
Yeah. So do you want to spend some time on young Daisy?
So completely different background. So I'm a born and bred Londoner. My father is British, fiercely Welsh, and my mother's Argentinian. And so she's very Catholic, and my mother's side of the family are very Catholic. And so I grew up Catholic. I was baptized Catholic. I then flew over to Argentina for my Holy Communion.
Oh, wow.
And yeah. And it was actually quite embarrassing because they handed me the cup of wine, and basically I drank all of it because I thought that's what I was meant to do.
You were supposed to take a sip and you drank.
I was supposed to take a sip, and I took the whole thing, and I could hear all my family in the background go shh, like this. But anyway, but it was still a good experience. But sadly, that's where my official faith journey ended formally. So my mum, I kind of see her as a Catholic Marvel superhero. So she's worked for the Catholic Church for many years now she works for a Christian charity that work with persecuted Christians in the Middle East, but she's worked for the Catholic Church for many years. And so Catholic highlights include going to Rome for the Catholic Great Jubilee in 2000 and sharing bread broken by John Paul II and sharing that with my mum. That was pretty cool. Even though I didn't identify as a Catholic at the time, but I still believed very strongly in God.
And were you in St. Peter's Square?
Yes.
In the Vatican for that? What an amazing spot that is.
It's just amazing. It really is amazing. It's really amazing. And then my mum also organised Pope Benedict XVI, who to my Protestant friends is Pope Ratzinger, I guess, to come over. And that was around 2010. So she organised a big event in Hyde Park. And so I went to see him there, which was an amazing experience again. And because she'd organised it, obviously we were kind of in the front, and I had all these bishops and cardinals behind me. And I remember turning round and apologising to them, saying, "Oh, you're far more pious than me, and I shouldn't really be here, and I'm not, I'm not even Catholic." And I remember a nun who was next to this quite important cardinal. She said to me, "Oh, you're right where God wants you to be." And I thought, okay, well, I'll roll with that. Another notable moment in my Catholic history with a bit of a Latin American flavour is a few years ago, I went to the hills in northern Argentina in a place called Salta La Linda, which means Salta the Beautiful. And there's a lady there who claims, she says she sees apparitions of the Virgin Mary. Thousands of people come from all over the world every Saturday. They come to see her. So even though I was very non-Catholic at the time, but still a very strong believer at that time, and wanting to honor my mum who'd invited me, I went there, and that was a pretty mad experience. If you've experienced the South American Catholicism, I don't remember seeing a branch on the way up to the hill/mountain that didn't have hundreds of plastic rosaries on, and then when you got there, she prayed over you with a rosary in one hand, and then she put her hand on your head, and there were loads of people falling over and stuff, but very silently, in a very Catholic way, not a Pentecostal way.
I do want to hear, I guess I'm curious about the Unitarianism a little bit more, because what you said is that you never believed in the Trinity at all?
No,
don't you have like the Catholic...
No, yeah, I definitely did the sign, but I didn't know what I was doing. But in my head, God and Jesus were always distinct.
So then you're an example of a Catholic Unitarian. Right?
Do they exist?
I don't know. I'm just asking.
I don't know. Yeah. No. I don't. Because I didn't even know the word Unitarian. It was just my understanding of it. I never shared it. There was no real forum to share it.
Right, but here's what I'm thinking about is my own mother. She was a Baptist, I think a Southern Baptist, and she said she never believed in the Trinity. And she was always, she would never use the U word, Unitarian, but she would. But that did describe what she believed. She believed that there was a Father,
100%,
and then there's Jesus. Okay, so I wonder how many people are in that category even now, in Orthodox Christianity, in Catholic Christianity, and Anglican Christianity, among evangelicals of all different stripes. I bet there are lots of Unitarians that, it's not organized in their mind behind a word or a theology. It's just sort of fuzzy.
Yeah. So those are my kind of highlights of my Catholic Unitarianism. And then on my dad's side, so I'll go into a bit of my dad's family history, because it's quite interesting from a nonconformist Unitarian angle. I come from about 5 generations of very nonconformist Christian thinkers who wanted the disestablishment of the church. So they were a mixture of Welsh and from the Isle of Man. I don't know if you've heard of the Isle of Man. It's a kind of small island just off the coast of Britain, obviously. And so my ancestors were big on trying to, they wanted freedom from worship. They didn't want to send taxes to the Church of England. They wanted the freedom to worship and for everything to be decentralized from Westminster, which is still why the Welsh and the Scottish hate the English, because they think that it's still very centralized around Westminster. So my ancestors are kind of famous for rejecting the Athanasian Creed, for not noticing Lent and not observing Ash Wednesday and things like this. So I like to think, I've just had an update from ancestry.com. I've still got 60% of Welsh blood flowing through my veins. So I like to think I've got a drop of that nonconformist blood in my veins, definitely.
Well, at least you don't have the accent, or else we'd need a translator.
Oh, yeah, no, Welsh is very strong.
We Americans have no idea what they're saying.
Oh, yeah, oh, really? That's my dad's side. But unfortunately, my dad is agnostic. I checked in with him last week. He's 85. And I said, Daddy, you still don't believe in God? And he said, no, but I respect your, beliefs and I love you and blah, blah. As you've mentioned before, the UK is quite a secular landscape. Brits tend to be just quite cynical about everything and just miserable sometimes. Maybe it's the weather, I don't know. I went to university. I went to Durham University, where Harry Potter was filmed. There I met my best friend, who is a evangelical Protestant. And I think she was the first person I'd ever met who was like an evangelical, who actually believed in God and was Protestant, I guess. Thinking back through my faith journey, one of the things that really impacted me was meeting her parents, and her parents inviting me to pray with them all out loud around the table. It really had an effect on me about how powerful prayer was, because prayer for me was always at night and to myself, and obviously always praying for other people, but very silent and very solemn in the Catholic way. Whereas this was very dynamic, and I felt really moved by it. It moved me to tears, actually. And I thought, this is what I really like, this kind of charismatic expression of faith. After university, I also took a year out in Spain, and then I moved to Argentina, went to Argentina for a bit. And then when I came back, I did a series of jobs, completely wild, different jobs. I've always taught for the last 20 years, but I also did a bit of modeling very badly. And then I also did just other things, other work. I had a shop, I was designing things. It was quite a hectic life. But because I didn't have that kind of firm biblical church foundation thing, I think I kind of drifted off and got very attracted by the esoteric things, new agey kind of things. I kind of got lured into reading esoteric books, reading about the new age and stuff like this, and also made friends with people who were kind of in that environment, I guess. I was craving the spiritual, but again, I didn't really have that firm biblical foundation to realize that it's not what God wanted, and it's not what I should have been doing. God really convicted me that I should leave the new agey world. Slowly, I started to kind of remove certain items like the Buddha on my on my wall and stuff like this, and to get rid of my esoteric books and stuff. I started listening to Derek Prince, who's a very famous Pentecostal preacher. He's died now. He was at Cambridge, and he was a philosopher originally, had no interest in religion, and God hit him one night, and suddenly he had this big healing and deliverance ministry. And so I started listening to his really powerful sermons, and they really impacted me. And I remember him saying about his healing and deliverance ministry that he felt really ill-equipped to do it, but he just did it anyway because he thought that God would equip him at the time. So that really stuck in my mind. Sure enough, in a very cliched way, kind of everything was going wrong in my life, and I guess I hit rock bottom. And it's the very cliched story. Sometimes I think God's, despairing at some of us, going, oh, another one who was so stubborn and had to get to a certain place in order to accept. So that's basically what happened, is that I text a friend of mine who I could see salt and light in him, and I asked him, could you take me to your church? And so I drove for 4 hours one Sunday and arrived at his church, and I arrived just in time for the pastor to say that there was someone there, and then he went on to describe everything I'd done in my life and everything I wanted to kind of clear out of my life. And so my legs just took me to the altar. It's never happened since. It had never happened before. And then I gave my life to Jesus in a full, whole way there and then. And then my life changed quite dramatically after that, in a very good way. After that, I decided to do an Alpha course. And the Alpha course is a very Anglican introductory course to God, or to Jesus, as they'd say, and the meaning of life, basically. But it's a very, very popular course here. Millions of people do it. It's inquiring people who want to do it, basically. And there's a focus on the Holy Spirit, a Holy Spirit weekend at the end of it. So I decided I wanted to do that. And at the same time, I continued going to this very charismatic Pentecostal church, where I had been born again. And I had a love for Jews, Muslims, and the gay community. And I felt like I was going to do something, helping them, serving them, loving them in some way. That's what God had impacted on me. At this conservative, very white middle class church, I met a friend who is the interfaith minister, was the interfaith minister at Lambeth Palace. Lambeth Palace is kind of, oh, this is a really weak comparison, but it's like our Rome. It's the head of the Anglican church in the world, yeah, but it's like a pauper's palace compared to St. Peter's Square. But anyway, so he worked there, but he was working with Muslims, and he invited me to this party with lots of, I guess, the Christian Anglican movers and shakers. I went there, I was just kind of chatting at this party, and he pulled me aside and he said, oh, would you pray with me and my friend for my friend? And I said, yeah, okay. So I went with him, and it was him who he's an established Christian. It was his friend who was a leader at Holy Trinity Brompton. HTB is the biggest church in the UK, the biggest Anglican and the biggest church, I think, of any denomination. It's a very big branch of churches. And they asked me to pray for their friend. And I thought, oh my gosh, I'm a baby Christian. What am I doing here? I'm totally not qualified to be praying for these people. But anyway, I prayed for their friend. And normally in that situation, I would definitely let the men lead the prayer, and especially because they were more qualified than I was in many ways. But I started just leading the prayer, and the Holy Spirit just gave me words of knowledge about their friend, about his upbringing. It obviously chimed a chord with their friend. Anyway, the prayer went well. And afterwards, I pulled my friend to one side and I said, why did you ask like little old me to pray? And he said, I could tell you were good in dark places, he said. And he left it at that. And I thought, okay. So that was a kind of signpost for me, one of the first signposts that I maybe was going to go into some kind of healing and deliverance ministry. Then when I got baptized, I actually ended up doing healing and deliverance on a lady who was there. So when I got baptized, I decided I didn't want to go the church route, because all the baptisms I'd seen in church were very fast and furious. And it was like dunk towel, dunk towel, dunk towel. And I thought, look, if I'm going to be completely born again, I need serious prayer and I want it to be intimate. And so I reached out to a pastor and I said, look, would you baptize me? Not in a church. And he said, yeah, sure, I can baptize you anywhere. He's like, I can baptize you in the Thames, which is like, I don't know, the Hudson River, which is pretty gross, or the sea, which I thought was cold, or your bath. And I thought, great, it can be nice and warm, and I'm really happy with that baptism. So we planned a date when obviously Josh could attend, and his sister, who's a big worship leader in a big church in South London. Unbeknownst to everyone, he brought along last minute 2 people, and one of those people was an inquiring Muslim. But she didn't announce herself to be a Muslim. She didn't say anything, and she was totally dressed as a Westerner. There was no indication. She wasn't a hijabi. She was completely Westernized. So when I got dunked in the privacy of my bathroom, she broke out into tongues. And she didn't know what was happening. She didn't understand it at all. But when that happened, and as soon as I got out and got dressed, there was a lot of commotion going on. And then she asked me to baptize her. So at my baptism, I ended up baptizing a Muslim into the Christian faith. And that was pretty wild too, because, I'd never baptized anyone. And secondly, just before I was about to put her in the water, I had a word of knowledge, basically, that she was here for something really bad that had happened to her. And God was showing me what had happened and the people involved, and that she was going to completely be set free from that. So I whispered to her what I could see. She was very shocked. And she said, that's exactly why I came today, because I want to be free from this. And then Josh's sister, who's amazing, she said to her, I see you in white robes before the throne of God, and you are so precious to him. And her eyes just totally, she was just totally popped out of her head. And she said, I've had that recurring dream for a very long time, and you've just confirmed again why I'm here. So that was pretty crazy. And again, it was confirmation. I had like confirmation that one, I maybe had a ministry with Muslims, and two, that healing and deliverance is obviously for today. So then out of the blue, I got asked to teach English to Arab, Orthodox, Coptics, and apostates. Out of the blue, my friend asked me, she said, would you teach English to all these people? And I said, yes, I would. And turns out the location was the church that I had become born again in. Yeah, that was actually a real privilege. That was about 1.5 years, and I heard some amazing stories about when Jesus visits Muslims, he really visits them in a really powerful way. So like at the end of their bed, speaking to them on the motorway, in dreams, in visions. I heard the most amazing things, and they really left everything. They left their families, their countries, and everything. Now, I'm going to say something super controversial. Obviously, I'm already a heretic in the Trinitarian world, but I'm likely to be a heretic in every world now. But I don't actually like the word apostate. And the only reason I'm using it is because in the Quran, Jesus is the Messiah. He is Masih. He is Al-Masih, which is the Messiah. He is Masih Isa, Jesus Christ, the Messiah. He's the Word, he's the healer. He's the mender of bones. And so for me, Muslims love Jesus Christ. They just don't understand him in his fullness. And obviously they've got the one God part right. I'm going to get a lot of haters for what I'm saying here, but I've just got to say it. But obviously we think Trinitarianism is the stumbling block for Jews and Muslims. That's just a fact. They can't understand that God can die. And so for me, I was just talking to them about the Jesus I love and also teaching them English, which was really cool. Then I did a term in prison, not because I was arrested and went to prison, but I did Prison Alpha, which is the Alpha course in prison. So it's introducing the prisoners to faith. And that was pretty amazing because obviously I broke all the rules. We weren't meant to hug the prisoners. I hugged the prisoners. What was weird was I ended up getting Facebook requests from them in prison. I was like, hang on, how's he got a mobile phone? But that was really amazing. And that definitely impacted me massively on my faith journey. I was always naturally Unitarian, but I'd never really thought that clearly, obviously, I never thought that Jesus and God were one person. I always saw them separately. Ironically, yeah, all the Catholic iconography does portray them as completely different anyway. So for me, there was always a distinction between God the Father and Jesus. And so when Josh and I started dating, I just came out with it and just said, you don't believe Jesus is God, do you? And and yeah, he paused, and I thought, oh, that's the end of our short-lived relationship. And then he confirmed that he never taught Jesus as God when he was running Alpha courses at university. And then I was like, phew. And then and then after that, I was driving with Josh, and we were off to see his atheist pagan druid friends who live with loads of lizards. That's another story. But anyway, and we were off to see them. And I feel the Holy Spirit prompted me to speak to a friend of mine who is the most knowledgeable person with the biggest encyclopedic brain I know on the scriptures and everything else. He was learning Latin and Greek from 2. He speaks multiple languages. He's very, very bright. And I met him I was hosting some politics events. I thought, okay, I'll text him to see what he thinks about the Trinity. So I sent him a message and I said, hey, I know you're on the board of a very ancient Trinitarian society, but you don't really believe in the Trinity, do you? And he responded almost instantly and said, thank you so much for contacting me, Daisy. He said, actually, no, I don't. And my parents run a Unitarian Bible study group. So we went to this Bible study group and we met loads of cool people, which introduced us to the very exclusive Unitarian community. Then we got invited to David Seaborn Jones, who's lovely and absolutely lovely. And we got invited to his house for a fellowship with Sir Anthony Buzzard because he was in town. When we prayed, I confess that our dream is to maybe open a church. Open a church here. It was Anthony Buzzard who said, I see you maybe opening a church, a Unitarian church in Israel.
Well, that's before
in Israel?
Israel, yeah.
That's before he realised that we celebrate Sabbath and stuff like that. So I'm often like arguing with little Carlos on the thing, going, Carlos, pipe down. Although I have a lot of respect for a lot of the stuff that Carlos does. So Daisy introduced us.
So when did you meet Anthony?
Maybe 3-4 years ago. Must have been before COVID.
It was when Joy was one, so it must have been 4 years ago. Yeah.
4 years ago. Okay.
Yeah. So so I took up this really unique job here in Northwood. Daisy and I, we got married, we moved in together, we started to develop this kind of little community of Unitarian Christians. I started to understand more about the history and this type of thing. And my vision still was to look, it was almost like to infiltrate into the Church of England, a bit like a Nicodemus type character in a way, to try and bring about positive change. Because, I'd been part of Trinitarian churches, there were no Unitarian churches that I was aware of. And so I kind of, again, still discreetly, I was, because still developing my understanding, and started going for the Bishop's Advisory Process, whatever, the BAP, that was it. Because our real aim, actually, my real aim in the first instance was trying to build unity through community and not doctrine in the first instance. So it was trying to bring about the love and practical outworking of our faith, to then demonstrate and bring influence in communities, really, to show the love and the positive effects that people who follow Yeshua can bring to a community. And because that's what I'd always seen in my younger days. And it's like my sister, you can break into the hard landscape here in the UK if you go out and preach the word in spirit and faith, because God will be there and people's hearts will be changed. People's lives will be moved. Well, we had this vision to try and unite churches, to get churches to look outside their purview of their four walls, to get people to pull resources, to pull ideas, a church full of old people helping maybe the church with like the young kids, get a few churches together so the young people can form a good youth group thing. But basically, all my ideas and work were just poo-pooed, the pastor didn't get back to me. And don't get me, look, having grown up in churches, I've got thick skin, do you know what I mean? I'm not taking it super personally. But when the guy in charge of the BAP, I transpired, was the guy who was promoting the transgender liturgy in the Church of England, I was just like, there is no way in our good Lord sweet earth I'm letting that chap determine whether I am suitable. So we withdrew ourselves from that. One of the offshoots of the church we were attending was going to be shut down. And the thing is, it was full of very beautiful, old, faithful Christians. A lot of them quite set in their ways, but they did outreach in the school, so sharing the gospel. They did work with old people and stuff like this. So we just thought it's wrong just to shut this down. So Daisy and I and another couple stepped up and we ended up co-leading this church for about a year and a half. Mm-hmm. And, I was able to do that. We were preaching regularly. So just preaching.
We were preaching Unitarianism in a Trinitarian church.
Yeah, basically.
But totally undetected because we were just preaching the word.
Yeah. And most people don't read their blinking Bibles. Do you know what I mean? Yeah. So
it does help when you're preaching from the Old Testament and the Psalms. you can go under the radar, but it wasn't in an underhand way or anything. It's just we just preached what was billed and what was written, and that was it. And it wasn't anything underhand.
Yeah, with the hope of changing hearts and minds and developing people, introducing people to God's name. what it meant to be the Messiah. What were the prophecies in the Hebrew Bible that were then actually fulfilled in Yeshua? Although I didn't, these are terms, probably still using the word Christ and stuff like this. But then it just got to a point where, every now and again, there'll be a focus on the Trinity, and it would just infuriate me massively. And we just got to a point, it's like, right, we actually want to step outside of this now. We want to have the freedom to really share what's on our heart. So in the early stages, it was about community. It was about just sharing the word, the gospel. In fact, we used to do lots of stuff on the military base where we are here. So running kind of messy church for kids and this type of thing. But the kind of the vision changed to like, I really now want to counter the Trinitarian narrative and take that head on.
And also our love for Jews and Muslims. When we were in Israel, we're going to have to do another show on the miracles that happen in Israel. Not least an Orthodox rabbi running after me and grabbing my arm and asking me what my secret was because I had joy. So I got to tell him about Yeshua and say, I love Yeshua and I love Israel, and had a good joke with him because then he prophesied. And I said, wait, you're not meant to do that. You just think the old prophets did that. Anyway, he has been wishing me a happy Shabbat every Friday for the last 5 years. And we had other amazing encounters where we just had Jews on their way to synagogue just come up to us out of the blue, stop us in the street and say,
in Galilee.
Yeah. And this guy just stopped us, and he was all in black with his little briefcase on his way to synagogue. And he stopped her. He wouldn't stop staring, and he was about to walk into a lamppost. So I was like, hey, hey, so anyway, he just came, he didn't even say hello. He said, I want you to know, I believe that Jesus walked on water here. And
then he asked us to share Jesus with him, tell him about Jesus. This is a random bloke who literally just walked up to us as we were walking from our hotel down to the wherever the town centre is in the base of Galilee.
I wouldn't really say it was a hotel, it was a shed. But anyway.
Well, yeah. I mean, it was astonishing. I mean, absolutely astonishing.
Yeah, it was amazing.
Yeah, so we met this a Muslim kind of evangelist who'd met a French guy, was it, who was going to basically convert to Islam. He was all happy, and he showed us a little photo of him. Anyway, the next day we had arranged to go and meet this guy, but we were running late. Not that this was the imam guy, just to again speak about stuff. And we're in the proper, what the streets are like in Jerusalem, completely crowded.
Thousands.
And then Daisy just says, "Stop that man." I look around and she's pointing towards like a backpack and like a bloke with a massive brown hair. I'm like, huh? And so I just went up to this guy and I just stopped him. I said, do you mind stopping? My wife would just want to speak to you. I have no idea why. Anyway, Daisy comes up. Daisy says, "You're the guy who's going to convert to Islam, aren't you?" And he goes, "Yeah, why?" And it's like, I'm like, oh my goodness, this is like one random bloke in thousands. How did Daisy know? Anyway, I said, look, I think we've been given a word and we'd like to just share our faith with you and speak to you, give you a story, this type of thing. And so we end up going to where's the beautiful cafe?
The Christchurch cafe.
Christchurch near David's Gate. And
the only Protestant church within the walls.
Yes, that's the one. Yeah. Have you been there in Jerusalem?
Are you talking about the old city?
Yeah, in the old city, yeah.
Which gate is it?
So David's Gate is the oldest Methodist church.
Yes, I do remember seeing that. Yeah.
Yeah. Best place to stay, I'd say, and best food. Anyway, so it was getting late, and we sat down. We got coffee. And I remember going into the toilet and just praying that God would give me the words to say. Help me witness. But I just prayed for God to help us, witness to this guy. Anyway, we go outside, and there's no one around except this old woman kind of sitting maybe 10 meters away from us. And when you know that someone can hear what you're talking about, but they're trying not to be too obvious, that they know that they kind of almost want to get involved in the conversation. And so she's rattling a little chair. And so I just went over to and just kind of introduced myself. Well, I can't remember quite how it happened.
I told you, invite her over.
Yeah. And basically up rocks this kind of 80-year-old Palestinian Catholic woman who takes over the conversation with this young French guy and gives him the most amazing testimonies of God's healing, of God speaking to her, of this vibrant faith of this old Palestinian Catholic woman. And we were just blown away. It was just like, wow.
And she spoke English?
Yeah, she spoke English. Yeah.
And the reason why she was there was because she was waiting for a friend who never turned up.
Mm.
So
Yeah.
I saw her on her own. I felt sorry for her. I was like, come over. And then she did all the evangelizing for us.
Yeah.
And then that was it. That was him back to being a Christian again.
Yeah. Well, that's great. It's great to hear that God is at work today. And that's really the message that's shining through from the two of you. Your testimony, your experiences. That's so great. So tell us about this conference that's coming up. You guys have a plan, and you have co-conspirators, and
we've hooked up with the Christadelphians. It's a miracle. No, I'm joking. No. We
Charismatics and Christadelphians working together. It is a miracle. Absolutely.
The UCA, I think, is a wonderful resource. I use a lot of it, and I do hope to become a more active participant in videos and debates as we go forward. But there was this real sense of an opportunity to try and build a community of Unitarian believers here in the UK. And actually, I think an aim for a conference is a fantastic idea. The vision very much aligns with what the UCA wants to do. You know, Daisy and I represent I think because of our background, we're quite comfortable speaking with Unitarians and Christians from all different flavors. And so therefore, perhaps I wouldn't call us honest brokers in every respect, because we do have our own particular kind of where we lie on certain issues. But the unifying call really was, I think it's Romans 15, 5-7, you know, may the God of patient endurance and encouragement grant you all to be in agreement with one another, so that with one mouth and one mind you might glorify the Father of our Lord Jesus, the Anointed One. Therefore, accept one another, just as the Anointed One has accepted you.
Although that's not the official strapline of the conference.
It is not, but that's the vision really. One mind, one mouth, you know, come together to unify, to kind of learn about and share our faith in God the Father, the one true God. But also to reach out across Europe, because, you know, Europe, there are a number of, you know, little strongholds of Unitarian Christians across Europe. And so it's an opportunity to pull people together. The great challenge, however, is finding a location. And the Trinitarian churches basically were turning around saying, no. So my plan was, and hopefully no one from it, was to find a church that has perhaps become more liberal in their leanings. And there's a particular denomination where, sadly, they've sold off more than 50-60% of their churches in the last 4 or 5 years. They've amalgamated. They'll very much fall under the liberal banner. But actually, the nice thing is that presents a freedom and an opportunity. So we found a wonderful location now where they've agreed that we can host it. I'm not going to say where it is at the moment, because I need to go down and do the recce, but everything seems fine.
Is it near London?
Yep, it's near London.
Okay. Well, that gives people a rough idea of where to.
Oh yeah, and it's a beautiful historic location. So everyone would love to go there.
And I think that's the angle we want. We want to entice the Americans here with a historic angle perspective.
You want Americans?
I know, yeah, no. Well, we want the whole board to come. I think the whole board have said they'd like to come, but no, we want to focus it on the kind of restorative aspect, restoring the faith back to what we believe is the original first century Christianity. This is our little historical bit, but it is pretty historical to have a UCA conference in Great Britain and the United Kingdom, you know, and that's why we want to incorporate the other activities like a day at Speaker's Corner, where we've met lots of Unitarians, and we'd love to also organise a debate with Dale as we're discussing and planning. So it has been tricky, as Josh said, because we always get initial yes, of course, and then I've always had to ask them, can you just check with your board that this is okay? They check with the board. It's like, sorry, your theology sucks. You're not welcome. and so this has happened like, I don't know, 20 plus times now. We've just been asking. But anyway, I think we do have a location to be disclosed soon. Very picturesque, very beautiful.
And do you have a time when it will happen?
Yeah,
so in July next year.
Was it the last weekend in July?
July next year. Let's not pinpoint it.
So we would like to maximise it, because July, August, September is holidays for Europe as well. is if we can link it in also with maximize the opportunity for the Americans to come
and good weather, because we've had
I was going to ask about that. Is it the case that in July there might be like a day or two without rain?
Yeah.
No, I think London gets a bad rap. I think in the 80s and 90s it rained more than it did now.
Yeah,
but
definitely.
I mean, we've had, I'd say 3 weeks of a summer of great, and now it's back to like blankets and whatever, sadly. But no, we would like to do it in the summer.
And we've reached out to different, through this process, developing relationships with Unitarians in more European countries that I was unaware of. So, one individual in Copenhagen knows some people in Norway, people in Norway know some people in Denmark. So that is developing. And also here in the UK, we're really developing our understanding of, there are different large Unitarian communities.
Big Messianic one. Yeah. And we kind of quasi-Messianic, aspiring Messianic.
Yeah, and so, God willing, it'll be an opportunity for people to come and meet, and also those newly out of the Trinitarian faith, because God willing, by next year there's going to be a lot more of them, and so it's that chance, that sense of belonging, and some good teaching.
When you are persecuted or an isolated minority, you can put aside a lot of these other issues to meet together. And, I think if the conference can be a place where people don't feel pressure to conform to one doctrinal package other than Unitarianism, it can really spur on a camaraderie rather than a competition between groups. Yeah, that's what it's done in the U.S. And so many of the groups in the U.S., especially people from my background, I was never really in the way, but my parents were. But they all built these kingdoms, and they built these walls as high as they could, and it was all loyalty based on, are you with this person or are you with that person? And that was my parents' generation. In my generation, what I've seen overwhelmingly is the tearing down of these walls, and overwhelmingly people saying, well, maybe we have some disagreements, but that's okay. I'm not intimidated by you. You're not intimidated by me. So let's work together as much as we can. This is really a period of building in the Unitarian movement, because we're not persecuted. We're excluded. I can't attend certain conferences. I can't attend certain universities. I can't get published by certain publishers, right? So I'm excluded. But I'm not actively persecuted, okay? And so we have an opportunity to build coalitions. And the UCA is an alliance. It doesn't mean you're friends. Churchill and Stalin were an alliance, right? They weren't friends. They didn't even like each other, but they were allies in World War II. So that's really a starting point. Hopefully, it goes beyond just sort of like putting up with the other person. So I'd love to see that softening happen, where there's banding together and pooling of resources and marketing and getting the message out, because I think you're right. There are all these sleepers in the churches that are just that never really made sense to me. They just didn't have a word for it. And I think we can agitate for a truth revolution within Christianity. Don't you?
100%. And I think another interesting thing is that the Christadelphian Church here have incorporated 1,000 Iranians. So not for this conference, because their English, they've just come and their English isn't great. We're not going to spend the whole conference, finding translators, Farsi translators, but maybe in the subsequent conferences, we could have a whole bunch of Iranians and Iraqis and people who found us.
It is wonderful that we have this opportunity to branch out and share ideas and stuff like this.
Well, let me come back on the Iranian comment. It's interesting because I did an interview with Sam Tiedemann on Afrahat, the Persian. And Afrahat is a little-known Christian from the 4th century who was a Unitarian living in the land of Persia, which is the land of the Iranians who speak Farsi. Sounds like the word Persia, right? So you can say to the Iranians when they're at this conference that they can have ethnic pride in Unitarian Christianity going all the way back to the 320s and 330s and 340s. Wow. Right about the time that Constantine died and Athanasius was agitating in the West in the East, Afrahat was writing his demonstration. So you have to check out that interview there. But there might be some coming full circle with these Iranians. They took a little detour to Islam for 13th centuries, 15th century, but now they're back. So I'm so excited about this conference. How can people hear more about it? I suppose we'll post it on unitarianchristianalliance.org. Or do you have other ways people can find out?
Yeah, we need to square away the venue officially. So we're in the final stages of that. And then we need a bit more back and forth with the board, just confirming everything's cool. And then we're going to push.
Yeah, as I said, so we're lining up some hopefully some high profile debates, some practical activities, and some activities left and right of the conference that if people want to attend that are not bespoke as part of the conference. So, visits to the British Museum where they've got this great biblical history tour.
I've always wanted to go to the British Museum.
Yeah.
Amazing. It's amazing.
You need about a week, right? Isn't it just so big?
So, and then we'll get stuff out on Facebook, on YouTube. We'll pass it around all the Unitarian commentators so they can put it on their different podcasts and stuff
Facebook
like this.
Facebook groups and Twitter or X, whatever we call this. This social media now. That sounds really great. And is it mainly targeted at academics, or is it more practical or inspirational, or how would you characterize?
It's going to be
everyone.
So we would like it to. We're going to model it on the US model. So a combination of academic, theological, practical, personal, a whole smorgasbord of Unitarian fellowship.
And we're trying to make it as affordable as possible. So initially, I think we did want the big grand venue until we got the invoice. And then we were like, oh, actually, you know what? We do want students coming. And also we want everyone to be able to afford to get both a plane ticket from Europe and to be able to afford to come. So I think we're also looking at catering, in-house catering, all that kind of stuff. So I think we're moving for the first conference. It won't be residential, which is what we were hoping for at the beginning, but it will be more affordable overall.
Okay.
We hope. Yeah, exactly.
It is near London, so we can't think it's going to be too inexpensive, right? It's a big city.
Yeah.
Well, you'll be surprised. As I said, I've hopefully applied a bit of my military planning to this little conundrum, and a bit of spiritual cunning and wisdom in terms of, because we're not blessed with America. We've got your giant super churches everywhere. We just don't.
Well, anything else you guys want to share real briefly or say before we close?
No, just to say thank you once again, Sean. You are an inspiration.
Yeah.
You've made a real difference in people's lives. Fulfilling your mission in love and in kindness, and with a good dash of humour. So which is brilliant.
Yeah, nothing apart from gifts for today, and we love Christadelphians, and we're really excited to be all working together. That's it.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, thanks so much.
Blessings.
Keep on.
Well, that brings this episode to a close. What did you think? Come on over to restitutio.org and find episode 517, Walking with God, and leave your comments and questions and feedback there. Well, we got a new review on Apple Podcasts. This is from user Z9918 Real catchy name there. Anyhow, this person writes, love this podcast, very informative, even for the layman. I love the How We Got Our Bible class and also the Early Church History 500 Years class. Well, thanks for that review. It certainly does help people find the show. I'd like to point out that on Restitutio, the website, restitutio.org, under the Classes tab, we do have quite a few classes in the archive now. We've got a class on early church history, scripture and science, Son of David, One God Overall, Why Christianity, How We Got the Bible, a parenting seminar, an evangelism seminar, a theology class, the class on the last 500 years of church history called 500 from Martin Luther to Joel Osteen, a class on the kingdom of God, a class on apologetics, and the first class was on the historical Jesus. So take a look at that if you would like to see other classes. Maybe you've taken one or two and there are others that you haven't heard of yet. It'd be a great place to go to find out about them. Also, there is a separate podcast feed that just has classes in it. It's called Restitutio Classes. And there's no interviews or sermons or other kinds of content, just the classes, one after the other. And that's probably the easiest way to take any of these classes because they are predominantly audio, although some of them are on YouTube as well, which you can access through the website like I mentioned. So take a look at that if you haven't already. We've also had a lot of interaction on my recent blog post, Are the Gods of the Nations Demons or Mere Idols?, in which I discuss the Hebrew word elalim, which means weak or powerless, but gets translated idols in Psalm 96:5. So if you're curious about that, a number of people have commented in, too many to read out here, but check that out at restitutio.org. And thanks for all those who have commented in with some good thoughts, both on the blog post and on the Facebook group. Speaking of which, are you yet a member of the Facebook group? Why not join? What are you waiting for? Come on over to the Restitutio Facebook group and see what people are posting. We post the weekly episodes there, and sometimes people have comments off of that, and other people post all sorts of interesting stuff. Well, that's enough for today. Thanks, everyone, for tuning in. What a great interview, huh? If you'd like to support us, you can do that at restitutio.org. We'll catch you next week, and remember, the truth has nothing to fear.